Before the 1997 general election, Labour made major promises to the LGBT plus community, but as soon as they were elected, they ditched them all. So we had to fight through the European Court of Human Rights and elsewhere to get those changes. The end to the ban on LGBT plus people serving the armed forces was the result of a European court case which forced the Labour government to end the ban. The equalisation of the age of consent was the result of an adverse ruling against Britain by the European Court of Human Rights, which again forced the Labour government to equalise at 16. A bit later on, after having 3 times refused to give LGBT plus people protection against employment in the workplace, the European Union issued a directive requiring every member state, including Britain, to do so. So then again, the Labour government finally did its work. I think it's very important to remember that until 1999, Britain had by volume the largest number of anti-gay laws of any country in the world, some of them dating back centuries. Yet, by 2014, just 15 years later, we had some of the best laws. That is the fastest, most successful law reform campaign in British history, if not world history. I can't think of any marginalised, disadvantaged community that has had so many negative laws overturned in such a short space of time. And that's a huge tribute, of course, to the tens of thousands of mostly unsung, unknown LGBT plus people who are part of those campaigns, and also, of course, to our straight friends and allies who marched and lobbied with us.
Visibility now is massively higher than it was, and it's much harder for this country to go back on the advances that we've made, because so many of us are known now to our families, to our workmates, and that was the power of equal marriage, which I was never for, because I didn't believe anyone should be married. I thought the institution of marriage is patriarchal bollocks. But actually, people getting married is something that a lot of straight people identify with. And I talk to young people now who say, well, we're not allowed to. And that's just amazing. And I think, stuff like that made much more of a difference than people like me were prepared to allow for in our nice little, the gay equivalent of the hard left citadels in the 80s. But it was fun. Even when we were having terrible rows, it was fun.
With the advent of same-sex marriage, legislated in 2013, but coming to force in 2014, that ended the last major anti-LGBT plus discrimination in law. But of course, the law is one thing, daily life is something very different. So even today, recent research shows that a third of all LGBT plus people in Britain, approximately 1 million people, have been victims of homophobic, biphobic or transphobic hate crimes.
I'm going to my first lesbian wedding next week, and not because I wouldn't go to lesbian or gay weddings before, but because most of my friends are not that kind of people. I've been to a couple of receptions on the fringe, but this will be my first actual LGBT wedding, other than the ones that were conducted for reasons of keeping people in the country all the way through the 70s and 80s. So it's going to be weird, because it's totally not what I ever fought for, but I know it's what lots of people who I love and who are my people, that's what they want. And it's only what straight people are allowed to do. So I still believe in that Stonewall mantra. If they've got it, we get it.
Even today, 45% of young people report that they were bullied at school because of their sexuality or their gender identity. That's truly, truly shocking. And then, of course, when it comes to the law, we still have qualified exemptions for religious organisations, not just places of worship, but also faith-run schools, hospitals and nursing homes. They're all allowed to discriminate against LGBT people if they can show that it's necessary to preserve their religious ethos. Now, why should religious people be exempt from the laws that apply to everyone else. They're entitled to their view, but they're not entitled to discriminate. And that's an anomaly in law which still has to be resolved.
Well, I feel like right now we're having a horrendous rerun of the run-up to Section 28 for trans people. It's all the same tropes about seducing children into a lifestyle, that people don't know what they are or what they want, and shouldn't be allowed to express it until some undefined age. We always used to joke that they'd quite like to set the age of gay consent at 80. And I'm sure there are people who feel like that about trans people now. So that is a horrendous rerun, the way that they're being attacked in the mainstream press. Literally, week after week, the Times is obsessed with trans people and having to apologise for making up stories. That's a horrible nightmare rerun of the bits of the 80s that I remember without any fondness.
And then we still have the second-class legal status of trans people, in the sense that the Gender Recognition Act of 2004, which was progressive in its time, is now way behind the curve. We need Irish, Maltese and Argentinian-style trans laws that allow trans people to self-declare by statutory declaration, rather than having to go through hoops and hurdles of getting medical certificates and certification.
We've moved on massively in our understanding of the breadth and depth of queer life, and we can now say queer and it's not a pejorative, but it's a word that we've reclaimed to cover all of us. And we talk about queer history, and as a historian, for me, it's much easier now to talk about the past because I don't have to try and label everybody lesbian and gay who had some form of same-sex attraction. We're not trying to reclaim everybody for our tiny little group. I love the way that young people are much more exploratory, much more fluid, much more cool. And I mean, yes, sometimes people do wild things and you think, you're probably going to change your mind about that in a decade or two. But that's fine, because youth is a time for experimenting, and a lot of you are not going to change your mind, and you're broadening our horizons. And I love that.